Yeah, the Confederacy aspect is weird. You should support that though. If you think about it realistically,
Hmm.
people rising up against the country, why would you want to celebrate?
Well, that's yeah. I mean
And they
that's
try to use the cultural ties, which yeah, I get, but you still revolted against the country.
yeah. No
We're
matter
gonna
what.
celebrate that now that we've come back together.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about it, I think that the with the whole Confederacy thing, allowing that stuff to fester, like basically after Reconstruction, um, Andrew Johnson realized or didn't really want to like make the South kind of become more like the North philosophically, so he kind of just went hands off, and then that led to a bunch of awful stuff, including the Ku Klux Klan and lynchings and all that. But basically, we let them develop this kind of perverse civic pride in the fact that they had tried to rebel and had failed, and that I think led directly to the establishment of white supremacy in the South for, the next 100 years. Um, I think that directly ends us up where we are right now. I mean, I think that what we see as with Charlottesville and the uh, insurrection at the Capitol building and all that, I think is directly descended from the uh, defeat of the Confederacy. I think that it's all one intellectual movement that is basically thought that it was. I mean, I think it was like kind of subterranean for people for a long time, but then Donald Trump gave expression to a lot of those ideas, and I think that a lot of people who weren't voting, who felt disenfranchised, suddenly rallied to his cause, and then you have 30% of the country right now who would prefer this were a white Christian ethno state.
30%.
Well, maybe not. That's an exaggeration, but I would say 15 to 20 of Republicans right now are fully behind the idea of Christian nationalism.
Yeah, but do you think they want that tied to race as well? Or you think that they just want the religious aspect back in place?
I don't know the percentages of how many of them are truly racist, and I hesitate to put a number on it.
I would want to think that it's small. I
I
would want to
would want
think
to think that, but there are. I mean, so that's an interesting question because there are people who are racist and don't know they're racist. And what I mean
is
by
that
that,
like that's a slippery slope. Is that like the microaggressions thing?
no,
Okay.
no. Microaggressions is irritating
You
garbage.
subscribe? Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
We're
no,
on the same page with
yeah.
that.
I mean, people go to college. They used to go to college so that they could defend their points of view against all comers, right? Like you go to college and all of a sudden you have all these different peoples of all these different opinions, like in a debate, and you have to defend your position and come off looking like you know what you're doing. That's what getting a college education was about. Microaggression suddenly becomes, well, I'm offended, so we're not allowed to talk about that anymore.
Shuts down
Yeah, that's
conversation.
just garbage. I have no tolerance for that. I also, though, I mean, I think it's okay for people to say, well, that offends me, and then explain why it offends you. But the cancellation of the argument and like shutting down of things, especially when it's not blatantly or not even intended as some kind of racist remark, I think that that's more damaging than anything. But there are people who operate within a system of thought where I think it's totally possible for people to judge other people based on race, sexual orientation, gender, uh, uh, sexual identity, all those things, without really processing what it is that they are feeling about it. Like a lot of dudes I know say, well, I have no problem with people being gay, but they're really, really uncomfortable around gay people. Or I have no problem with transgender folks, but they have like a visceral reaction to people who are transgender when they encounter them. A lot of people who I don't hate black people, but I'm not comfortable being around black people. Or, I think there's a lot of levels that people operate on. And so do all racists need to actively think that they hate people of a different, race in order to be racist? No, not at all. I think a lot of those inclinations operate on subconscious levels. I mean, institutional racism, the idea that systems are set up to perpetuate certain things, like the fact that so many black people end up in prison where are you saying that there not as many white people are breaking those laws? No, but more of the law enforcement effort is centered in black neighborhoods. Why is that? Well, there may be actual concrete reasons that don't have to do with like
Race.
race.
Well, we could tie that especially to economic status. You think
Yes,
of
which is
where people are predominantly located in these poorer regions,
yeah, and
higher
then
police presence, higher gang presence, higher violence,
and
higher crime.
class, But the thing is like if you go back and you look at like the levels of wealth within the black community and what happened after racism. I mean, basically in 1865 they were all set free and had no wealth whatsoever and have never really had a chance to accumulate wealth because the systems in the South and elsewhere didn't allow them to own property, or they did, but then they made it hard for people to buy homes. There's been a lot of structural limitations to the black community in terms of acquiring wealth. So they've never been able to dig themselves out of the hole that slavery created. And so now we're in a position where, yeah, a lot of the poor neighborhoods are black.
Well, and Latino now, I believe.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know the numbers, but not white. But I come from a poor white background, so I know that, like, people talk about privilege, which is a touchy word. Like, I didn't feel like I had privilege growing up. My dad was a paranoid schizophrenic. My mom, he couldn't work. My mom worked. We were on welfare. We moved around from roach-ridden apartments to, grandma's house. And so I didn't feel like I actively had any advantages that anyone else had. But I also had a best friend who was Hispanic as a kid, and he was dealing with a lot of different things that I never had to deal with in terms of like people just judging him off the bat because of the color of his skin, or assuming that because he was Mexican he was going to be lazy, or just a lot of things that I was there to experience with him because we hung out together all the time. Like we went to a supermarket and he got tackled in the parking lot because someone had thought that he had stolen something, and he hadn't stolen anything, but this dude came flying out of the store, and it was actually it was in Modesto, California, and the guy who tackled him was a teammate on the football team with my older brother, and he comes out and he does this like flying, tackle of a 10-year-old kid who was my best friend, thinking that he'd stolen something, and he hadn't. And, to get down to it, do I really know that happened because he was a Mexican? No, but it sure seems suspicious, and I didn't get tackled. So, all those problems are like complex, and I can't pretend to know the answers to whether or not,
I don't think anybody knows the answers.
No, no one does.
The point is just having the discussion.
Yeah,
that's what seems to be lost today, is we can't even talk about it.
Exactly right. And I think that we need to all be real. It's like, what do we really know and what do we suspect about this stuff? I think that the number one thing for my mind is just to be compassionate, like to understand that both for people who are poor white and poor black and people all over the middle, it's like everyone is struggling with something. And I think that it all boils down, hopefully, to our common humanity, and maybe focusing on more of our commonalities than our differences would help solve those problems.